Tonight, there are Daemonites inside of Demon Knights. That's not going to get confusing at all. Frankenstein and Deathstroke both reveal how deep their daddy issues run, and Superboy has decided that you're not allowed to follow the story, even if you're reading every other book involved. All that and more this week on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 32 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and have you ever had one of those things where it's super important and you know you should write it down in order to remember it, but you don't because you think it's so important that I won't possibly forget it? And then, of course, inevitably you forget it. Well, hey, last month I looked at the list of upcoming stuff and I saw, oh hey, Legion Lost, Superboy, and Teen Titans are all going to be going into their first event of the culling. That's something I need to make sure I mention. Oops. So here we are, where they are all going into their preludes, or at least Legion Lost and Superboy are. Teen Titans isn't on this week. And I forgot to mention that last month. So yeah, we're in an event. It's called the culling. I'm already not a fan, but we'll get to that later. Additionally, Mr. Miracle, unfortunately, as we have said before, is canceled with this week's issue. This is the final time we will see Mr. Miracle in his own book. And I would usually say what's replacing it, because they pretty much are one-to-one on keeping this at 52 ongoing books. The problem being is that looking ahead, there's a whole bunch of shuffling in terms of some things get delayed, some things get pushed forward, and blah, blah, blah. So, there isn't actually a New Wave book that really replaces this one. It's just kind of its own thing. If you really want to get down to it, it's Earth 2. So look forward to Earth 2, but it won't be on week 2. So I don't know. Regardless, I've wasted enough time without telling you what's coming out this week. So we have the number 8 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 7 issue of the S.H.A.D.E. I will not be talking about them in that order because, again, I forgot that there was an event starting this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into the preludes of The Culling. Superboy number 8, written by Scott Lobdell and Tom DeFalco, art by R.B. Silva and Iban Coello. This is apparently a prelude to the event coming up called The Culling, which I completely forgot was even a thing. So hey, Scott, how are you going to get me prepped for that event? The answer is, you're going to make me even more confused, because genuinely I had to read many articles to figure out if I missed something between the last issue of Teen Titans to this issue of Superboy. Because it doesn't flow. It doesn't work, and I don't know what's happening. So we pick up Superboy's being punched in the face. Last issue of Teen Titans, by the way, Superboy was rescued from nowhere, and then they were all dropped into a pit by a guy named Harvest. That's it. That's all I had. So Superboy's now being punched in the face by some guy named Grunge. He calls himself a Ravager, and he is helping Superboy get prepped for the culling. So Superboy is equally as confused as I am to what all of those terms mean, but apparently his telekinesis doesn't work on this guy the same way it didn't work on Dr. Fairchild, Caitlin. So he's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna use my strength. So he jumps up in the air and kicks Grunge in the neck, and it just shatters the guy's neck. And he's like, "Oh, geez, I genuinely killed that guy. I'm sorry, I thought you'd be stronger than that." But then Grunge kicks him in the face and reveals that he is a metamorph, which means he can absorb properties of things of blah blah blah. And so he uses that ability to make the floor grab Superboy. And then he's like, I get to test my field powers because it used to be where I had to touch things in order to gain their abilities. But now I can do it without that, thanks to Nowhere helping me. And then Superboy reminisces on what apparently happened between issues, where the Teen Titans saved him, and then Harvest dropped him in a hole, and then they say how there was a creepy looking woman named Omen, and he's like, he literally says the words, "What was that?" That part didn't happen. And I couldn't figure out where that happened. I still don't know where that happened. So that just happened. There's a creepy woman named Omen. Fine. So then they continue to fight a little bit longer, and Grunge makes the comment of like, maybe Omen's having better luck with the rest of your team. And Superboy smirks because he's like, "Psh, my team." And Grunge doesn't take the smirking well, and he smashes Superboy's head into the floor. Meanwhile, somewhere in Manhattan, Caitlin Fairchild is busting into a nowhere facility because she needs a pod to get to somewhere. And looking over at this rampaging destruction she's causing to get to the pod is Detective Jocelyn Lore, who I think was in Teen Titans. Maybe it was this. Honest to God, they're all blurring together now. But it's a detective who has some secrets of her own. So then we cut back to nowhere. I think this was where Superboy's breakout was with the Teen Titans, and scientists were running around just trying to put out fires, and they're like, "Oh, we just got to seal this whole place up." And Rose Wilson comes in and says like, "I don't think Harvest would like to hear that you guys are just giving up." And he's like, "Oh no, we're not gonna give up." And then Rose gets blasted by someone who we don't get to see, and then she starts freaking out and is about to start slashing away at all the scientists. But then she's blasted again by Solstice from the Teen Titans, who's like, "Rose, you were a really, really bad person, but since then you've lost your memories or something, and now you can be reborn and you can be a better person. And please, you have to cling to the woman that you've become, Rose." And she's like, I don't know if I have the power to." And then we just cut away from that. Superboy's still getting the crap kicked out of him, but then he realizes, wait a minute, he said something about Nowhere doing tests on him. So maybe instead of using my TK field like a blunt object, I use it like a scalpel, and I try to rip out whatever surgical implants they put in him. So he does, and it works. And then they're just both lying in a pool of blood together because he did get the crap literally kicked out of him. So as Superboy's lying unconscious, he's visited by Harvest, who's like, he's already healing so quickly. I doubt even Center Hall would have been able to get this much information. You are such a great asset, but also such a failure, Superboy. But hopefully you will survive the culling and lead the Ravagers when your time comes. Then Rose Wilson pops into Harvest and says, "Hey, by the way, I brought Solstice. She said something about me being a good guy, but I don't care anymore." So apparently they're both being delivered to Omen. Solstice is being delivered to Omen, whereas Superboy is destined for the colony. Which then we see Superboy waking up to the sight of Beast Boy and Terra. Beast Boy is red. It's a 4. No, it's a 3.5. Okay. I don't get it. I read it twice. I did research on just this one issue trying to figure out, did I miss something? And the answer is no, I didn't. This is how it was. This is supposed to be the thing that gets you excited for the big event starting next month, I believe. This is garbage, if that's the case. I'm okay with the fight scene in between. It's an interesting thing of him learning to use his powers more specifically than just hitting people really hard. But what? I can't even think of words anymore. This has actually lobotomized me. That is where we're at, of me just sitting here thinking comic bad. And it is. It is just not a good comic. And I don't know where we're even going with this. I don't know. They didn't explain to me what a Ravager was. They didn't explain to me what a colony was. They didn't explain to me what the culling is. They didn't explain anything. And I understand if you're setting that up for later. But then, what's the point of this issue? What are we doing? And don't tell me it's getting Superboy onto the field, getting him wherever he needs to be for the story, because you could have just, like, he just randomly showed up fighting this dude in this issue. You could have just as easily had him fall to his pit in Teen Titans and then show up where he needs to be in Superboy 8. That's it. That's all you had to do. But no. I hate this. I don't like this. The culling is dumb already, and I have only read one Prelude issue so far. So, God, 3.5. Boo this book. Legion Lost, issue 8, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Aaron Kuder. Last issue, I can't even remember, but this issue is a prelude to The Culling, which is a Superboy and Teen Titans crossover, and dear God, I am not excited for that. So, this issue picks up with Agent Psykill, and by the way, you know how my constant complaint with Legion is that there are too many characters that don't get enough time, that like I'm able to know who they are? This one introduces 7 more people, all with their own creative names. So here we go. We open up with Agent Psykill talking to Director Centerhall of Nowhere, and Centerhall is basically like, hey, we picked up a story of some wolf boy running around New York City. We need you to go get him. And he's like, I'm already locked and loaded. I've been waiting for like an hour. Waiting on you now, bud. Let's go. And then we cut over to Timberwolf and the Legion, who they're all pissed at Timberwolf because he stole money, because they said last issue how they needed money, and clearly this wasn't the right way to go about it. And Timberwolf's like, I stole it from bad guys. That makes it okay. And Tyrock blasts him with some waves or whatever, and he's very pissed off about that. So a fight starts to break out, and all the other Legionnaires are like, hey, everyone chill. Tyrock, you need to be the leader. You need to be the bigger man. Timberwolf, you got to see what you did was at least a little bit wrong here, okay? You understand? So Timberwolf storms out, and everyone's just kind of at odds with each other right now. And as Timberwolf walks out, he meets up with Oz, that guy who told him to steal the money before, and they just get to talking. And then we see from above that Rose Wilson and Psykill are up in like a helicopter or something, and they've got a trace on Timberwolf. And Psykill's like, hey, he needs to be left alive. And Rose is like, psh, that's no fun, but I can do it. And so she dives down to attack Timberwolf, who senses her coming and moves out of the way. And she's like, very impressive. Let us fight. So then the rest of the Legionnaires are like, hey, all right, look, someone needs to go take care of Timberwolf. And, like, we just need to figure out what it is that we're actually doing here. Because obviously we're mostly at odds over the fact of we're kind of trapped here in the 21st century. So, yeah, that's kind of a thing. Chameleon Girl, like, tries to console Tyrock, and he's just like, no, I'm good, bye. And then she walks off saying, like, I have my own secret mission. Like, they all have their mission for Alistair and the virus, but I have my own secret mission. And then she goes in the other room and sees Colossal Boy of the Legion, who is like, hey, I thought maybe we could give you and me another chance. And she's like, me and you are ancient history, Colossal Boy. And then he punches her in the face, and she's like, you're not Colossal Boy. And then we see that it is some other person who's tricking her into seeing things called misbelief. Then we cut to Tyrock, who's walking down the hallway saying, like, oh, boy, I know Timberwolf flies off the handle. I need to be the bigger man. I shouldn't allow the prophecy to... No, I can't think about the prophecy right now. What's that wind coming? And then we see another one named Windstorm. And then, as the rest of the Legionnaires are trying to figure out what to do, Psykill busts in, grabs Wildfire, and just runs through walls outside of the apartment complex. And then we got 3 more named Ridge, who's a weird-looking lizard man, Crush, who's stretchy, and Hammer Fist, who's a marshmallow man. And they attack the remaining Legionnaires. And it's just... Basically, they're just trying to divide and conquer and split everybody up and going their own separate ways here. And Tellus picks up that they're thinking about a guy named Harvest who strikes fear into the hearts as they speak it. But yeah, everyone's just getting their asses more or less handed to them, except for maybe, I'm blanking on her name, Dawnstar. Yeah, Dawnstar kind of has the one up on Ridge. And then Chameleon Girl's fighting Misbelief, and misbelief's making her think she's underwater, so she turns into a big fish, and then she's like, oh, okay. And then she makes her think she's in a desert, so it doesn't even do anything to her. Back to the Timberwolf fight. He has the upper hand on Rose, but Timberwolf immediately is like, hey, based off of the fact that you're trying to push me in that direction, aka away from my friends, makes me think that my friends are probably under attack. So I'm going to get back over to them and help them out. Bye. And she's like, well, face my swords. So Psykill is fighting down against Wildfire, and he's like, hey, that's some pretty fancy tech you got there. Where'd you get it? And he's like, none of your business. And Wildfire's like, whatever. As the longer we fight, the more advantage we have, because the Legion never surrenders. And he's like, good to know. Hey, everybody, put up your blast shields, because I'm about to go hot in 5, 4, 3. And then he explodes, and the narration says that a wave of energy exudes from him, and for 3 city blocks diameter, every living being falls unconscious. So everyone just picks up their respective Legionnaires, makes their way out, and for whatever fucking reason, at the bottom of the page, we just see the Teen Titans just standing there. Not even like in panel, they're just against white, but it's just the Teen Titans are there. To be continued in the Legion, or the Culling Part 1. I don't even know. Like, as a standalone story, it's fine. Like, it's good. And I gather that they're just grabbing the Legionnaires to, like, get them over to where the culling is happening, because their story, in absolutely no uncertain terms, did not lead up to this event. So they just needed one issue to be like, okay, let's just shove you on over there, and then we'll just deal with it. But I don't know. I shouldn't hate on the culling before I've even read any part of it. Like, we're only in the preludes right now, but it genuinely feels like this was so haphazardly thrown together, and the Legion characters especially don't feel like they are any part of it, because it has been mentioned here and there in Superboy and the Teen Titans, but this was just its own totally separate thing, and now it's just like, oh, by the way, you're here now too, because teenagers. Yeah, that's it. Teenagers. I don't know. It's a good issue, but it's just soured by the idea that it's leading into the culling. And that's my own personal thing, and I'm trying not to let that affect it, but it is. So, overall, this book, 5.5. I'll give it that extra 0.5, because it's just completely separate. It's not continuing on with anything. Like, they tried to make it a thing of like, oh, but Timberwolf stole the money. But even then, it was just like, oh, okay, but that really didn't matter at all. Like, we're just going to sweep that under the rug practically as soon as we can. So, yeah, whatever. 5.5, and we'll go into the culling next month. Dear God. Batman and Robin number 8, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. We left off last issue with Damian using the forbidden forehead poke technique to kill nobody, and this issue is just the fallout and resolution of the entire arc as a whole, and as such, it goes by actually pretty quickly. So, Damian, after being beaten by nobody so senselessly, is basically, like, pretty much like dying. He has a concussion. He ain't talking straight. He's just like, I'm sorry. I did what I had to do. I'm going to take a nap now. And he just kind of collapses. And Batman's like, okay, we're going to get out of here. And we're going to get you help. And so he makes his way back over to the bat plane, wing, whatever it's called. And he gets up out of the boat before it just sinks into the sea, taking nobody along with it. I'm like 99% sure he is actually dead, but there is still leaving open that tiny little doubt. And as they're flying back, Damian in his groggy state's just like, by the way, I named the dog Titus. And Batman's like, you'll see him in a few minutes, son, just hold on. So they get him back to the cave, and Alfred's already prepped the medical table. And they start fixing him, and Alfred's like, oh, well, because of his training with Talia and all the assassin stuff, he was able to take a beating, but he still has a lot of stuff wrong with him. Also, you took a pretty bad beating yourself when you crashed the plane into the boat, so maybe you should sit down. And he's like, don't worry about me, worry about helping him. And basically, Alfred then goes on, like, like, are you sure you're all good considering everything that's happened over the past, like, day or so? And he's like, no, Damien was never going to join nobody. He was just a ruse to get him out and vulnerable. He killed him. And Alfred's like, oh, oops. So then we go to Bruce talking to his parents, their picture on the wall, just basically saying how he failed his son and how he wished he could have been the one to have taken on the burden of killing someone, but no. And then he collapses due to his own injuries. Alfred comes up and checks on him, and he's like, all right, follow the light with my finger. And he tells him how Damien's totally fine, but Bruce definitely has a concussion, and he is needing to stay off of the streets for at least a few nights. So we see Damien is recovering, and Bruce comes in and drops off the recording that he made over those 2 issues, saying, like, hey, here's my history with Ducard, here's why I'm worried about you, blah, 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 all that stuff. And he drops it off when Damien's asleep, but as soon as he steps out of the room, Damien wakes up, plugs it in, and starts listening to it. We cut to Bruce is cleaning up his father's den, which is the only room that he's left completely untouched for all of these years. And Damien comes in and visits him and be like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm getting rid of the darkness. This is something that needs to happen in order for us to just move on collectively. And Damien tells him how he listened to the tape and how it was obvious that Bruce wanted to kill Morgan after everything that happened, but he didn't. And he's trying to figure out why. And Bruce basically just gives him the whole spiel of, like, why he doesn't kill him and whatnot. But this actually spins it in the way that I like it. Not in so much of, like, oh, if I started killing, I'd be no better than them. It's framed in the sense of you're not going to break the cycle of violence by being more violent. Even if you remove the violent players from the field, you're still a violent player. So you have to try to be better than that. Mind you, he does beat up people a lot, but I at least appreciate the sentiment. And Damien basically just goes on, like, I don't want to end up like nobody. I want to be like you, but I don't know if I have the ability to believe in the things you believe in. And Bruce says tough, because that's how it's going to have to be from now on. That's it. And they have a little heart-to-heart moment, and they say how they may not understand each other, but they do still care about each other. They are still a father and son. And as the sun starts rising, they're like, all right, well, Alfred said we need to stay off the streets for a while, so how about we actually do something together, something boring. So they just go outside and they play fetch with Titus for a while, apparently the entire day because it's already sunset again. And as they throw the ball around, they both look up into the sky, see the bat signal, and run off to go take on whatever they need to, with Alfred just being like, just one night, is that too much to ask? I like it. I think it's a fast wrap up to everything, but in terms of the story itself, I honestly feel like the past 3 issues have been kind of spinning their wheels a little bit. I think that it would have been like, okay, in order for this comic to end on a cliffhanger last issue, it needed to end with him killing nobody, and I get that. But I kind of wish there was, like, an issue of them recovering and, like, trying to find the words to say, and then this issue comes in and they actually wrap up everything. Or something like that. It just feels like this went by really quick of, like, yeah, no, like, we're back to good and everything's fine, and I liked it. Don't get me wrong, I liked it, but it did feel like really just like boom, 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 okay, we're done. So of course, this isn't the end of the, like, run. There's going to be more stories told by Tomasi and Gleason, but for this particular one, it just felt like for 3 issues of, okay, Robin and Nobody are a team now, maybe, I guess, and then they're going to beat each other up and blah, blah, blah. This just felt really fast compared to that. So overall, I did enjoy it. I would give it probably a 7. It's a solid writing. It's a solid book all around. I do have issues with it. I think that the art has improved throughout. There's still the occasional strange face every once in a while, but for the most part, I really feel like my problem of, like, too heavy of inks in the beginning or something that was going on with the faces has been remedied. So yeah, art has definitely improved over the course of the book. And writing-wise, it's just a solid father-son story. So yeah, 7 for this, and we'll see what happens in the next arc. Batgirl number 8, written by Gail, Simone, art by Ardian, Syaf, Alitha, Martinez, and Vicente, Cifuentes. Whole team of artists on this one. And already we're at the end of yet another arc. I feel like Batgirl is just really all up on these 2 to 3 issue arcs. But, yeah, last issue left off with Batgirl chasing down some of Grotesque's thugs through the sewers, and then when she came across one of them, turns out that he was one of the Joker's goons the night she was shot. And this issue is just rattling off of that, and we just get the whole recap. His name is Danny the Weasel Weaver, and he was definitely there that night, and she's kind of freaking out a little bit. And as she's freaking out, the other thug that she was chasing down gets up and is about to knock out Batgirl. She, of course, realizes it, knocks him out, and saves him from getting a concussion from hitting his head on a block, or like maybe cracking it open. And then Danny stands up and he's like, do I know you? And Batgirl tells him just like, go, get out of here before I change my mind. So he runs off and she's like, okay, I have a lot to process right now and I need someone to talk to. So she heads home to talk to her roommate, but when she gets back, she finds out that her roommate is working late that night and her dad is also unavailable at the time because, you know, commissioner and whatnot. So she realizes there's only one person left that she can really talk to, and she calls up her mom. And she wants to meet up, so she wants to go over to her mom's place. Then we cut over to Grotesque's penthouse, and Danny's made his way back to Grotesque, and he's like, hey, I don't know why, but she let me go free. And Grotesque's like, interesting, but why would she let you go, and only you? And he's like, I don't know, maybe she recognized me or something. I just figured I should tell you. And he's like, oh, yes, of course, but maybe we can exploit whatever she has going on with you to our own advantage. Then we cut over to Barbara meeting with her mom, and it's a lot of arguing, like right off the bat, and basically she's just like, why did you leave? Why did you leave Dad and me? Why did you just leave us all alone? And the story she tells is that Barbara's little brother, James Jr., one day he came up and said, hey, Mom, I have something to show you. It's a present out in the yard. And it turns out that James killed their family cat and then told her, if you don't, leave, if you don't get out of here, then I'm going to kill Barbara. So she just left. She believed the 12-year-old who had killed the family cat and just left. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a psychopath. However, Barbara pulls up oh, okay, and you couldn't have told us at all, ever? And she's like, no, don't get me wrong. I had my own issues, but I went to therapy, and I got through them, and now I feel I can finally come back. Especially because James was also recently taken care of or something like that. I don't know. So Barbara runs out because she just can't deal with this again. It's like everything is just something she can't deal with. So her mom says, I love you, just remember that. And Barbara leaves, and she's like, all right, I'm getting in my crime fighting gear because I should never have let Danny go. So she gets into Batgirl's gear, finds Danny's last address. Apparently he was on parole, and she busts in and says, all right, I'm taking you to jail. Don't make this hard. And as she busts in, she sees Grotesque is already there, wielding his electricity powers, shocks Batgirl, and just be like, oh, I knew you'd come back for him. I don't know why it is that you like him, but you will be the finest addition to my collection, blah, blah, blah. And he just goes through his whole rigmarole of I desire the greatest things and whatever. And Batgirl immediately just starts knocking him out. Apparently he's able to use his powers a bit more effectively because there's a thunderstorm going on. But as he's about to shock Batgirl, Danny apparently aims for Grotesque and tries shooting him. He misses and then gets a lightning bolt to the chest. But that gives Batgirl the opportunity to just beat the ever-loving piss out of Grotesque. And yeah, it's literally just a full page of just, all right, this guy is being brutally attacked. So once he's face down in the mud, Batgirl goes over to Danny, and turns out that he is fatally wounded. He is bleeding out in his chest. There's no way he's going to be able to make this. And Batgirl's like, hey, look, I can get you help. I can do that. And he's like, yeah, but then I'll have to go to jail, and I'd rather just die than go back to jail again. And then he just explains that night with the Joker. Because I guess maybe he understands what's going on. And he's basically just saying, yeah, we shot that girl and I didn't feel bad about it at all. But, then I just left and went home. And she's like, no, you didn't. I know what you did. You left and then you felt bad about what happened and you called the police. So that way, like, because otherwise I would have been left alone and I would have died there. But you called someone and I got help and that saved my life. And why did you do that? And he's like, I don't know. I just felt bad for her, I guess. Something right in the bad life. And then she dies as Batgirl's like cradling him in the rain. Didn't expect this beginning of the issue, got to tell you that much. And then we get a little 2-page epilogue here. 10 blocks away, some girl's leaving a bar, and as she does so, she's approached by a man who's just like, oh, well, hey, I'm wondering if you had a light. And they start flirting a little bit, but as they do, she's like, oh, well, you know, you're cute in a weird kind of way, so yeah, I guess we can go out for a drink. And she asks for his name, and lo and behold, it's James. It's James Gordon Jr. Psychopath is back. Grotesque was dumb. Like, he was a dumb excuse for a villain in general, and I get why we didn't stick with that. But I feel like the story that Gail wanted to tell here was the Joker's goon coming back, and I actually like that one. I actually like that side of the story. It is a interesting plot to tell of like, okay, this guy who had a hand in it, but then also did something good, like, it's just this morally gray area of like, he's not a good guy, but he did a good thing. And I like how they deal with that of him, like, you know, he dies heroically for whatever reason. That's the one thing I didn't like, is that they didn't really justify why he had this turn of heart all of a sudden. The only thing that I could possibly suggest is that Batgirl let him go. But like, was that really enough? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it should be to me. But no, it's a solid issue overall. Art is good. I like the tease of James at the end. I'm interested by the mom's backstory with James, especially now that we're introducing him again. I think it's an interesting way to move forward, and it actually gives the mom something to do besides, please, honey, let me be in your life some more. So yeah, no, I'm interested in everything this book is doing right now. I just think that the framing device of Grotesque as a villain was just dumb. That's the only flaw it really had. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I do think it is pretty good. I'm always on my toes with this book because the villains themselves have been consistently pretty dumb, but the story going on in the background has been pretty good. So we'll see if they can keep that up. Batwoman number 8, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Haden Blackman, art by Amy Reeder. Last issue we left off with... Okay, so the thing about this book is that it's told in like 8 different alternating stories of all these different people at all these different times. So when I say last time, I'm just going to say Batwoman's story, which is by far like the least progressive each time, where last issue had left off with them about to fight Killer Croc and the literal Bloody Mary. Sure. So this issue picks up, they're about to fight again, and Batwoman pulls out the weird electronic arrow thing that Chase gave her last issue, and she starts spouting off like commands to it, and it shocks Killer Croc, and it shatters Bloody Mary, and it sets fire to La Llorona. And then as it's going through and basically just tearing through the entire monster squad as we've had it, Falchion, the leader of all of them, just picks up one of the little hostage kids, puts a sword to its neck and be like, all right, stop what you're doing or I'm going to kill the kid. And Batwoman backs down. Then we cut to Morrow's story, who is a guy who was helping Falchion, I think. He's a guy who makes monsters. And we cut all the way back to the fight scene that was being dissected back in like issue 3 of this book, and it shows exactly what happened, and the dude who had the hook hand was the victim in that scene, and they show him be basically on an operating table and infused with this magic technological weird hook thing called the Ashoth, that it wants to be a part of somebody, it wants to be a part of flesh, and so it burrows itself into his skin and turns him into the weird butcher hook hand guy. So it's weird that they had it that far planned, but I like it. Then we cut to Kate's story a week ago. And basically it boils down to Chase has been surveilling Maggie, who is going out and like going out to lunch and stuff like that, sometimes with friends, sometimes without. But what Maggie points out is that Kate is never around on these dates, and as such, it seems like she's about to like break up with her or whatever. Kate's like, "You don't know anything about my life," and she's like, "Well, I can tell you that regardless, you need to be fostering this relationship because we need her. We need to know what she knows. So go ahead and keep that relationship going, at least for the sake of the DEO." And yeah, so that's that. 6 nights ago, Maggie's story. They're out on 2 boats out in the harbor. One of them has Soon, the woman who Maggie picked up during a raid, and Batwoman is on the ship that she believed Soon to be on because they needed to grab Soon for Maggie's plans. However, or not for Maggie, for Chase's plans. I think I might have said Maggie like 4 times in there. Regardless, but it turns out that she hopped on the wrong boat, so she has to go over to Maggie's boat, and they get into a big fight scene because Batwoman had stealth before, but now she's being seen, and she actually has to fight Maggie a little bit, but she puts her down very gently, and then as she makes her way down to the hull of the ship in order to get Soon, she has like a tranquilizer dart to knock her out, but Maggie attacks her again, and Kate accidentally doses her with the tranq dart, and she's like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry, that wasn't meant for you." Then we cut to Jacob in the hospital with Bet, and Jacob's convinced that she moved, but the doctor's like, "That was probably in your head, but you should still stay here and keep talking to her." And that was an entire page of that. And then we get Chase's story 6 nights ago, where after they got Soon off the boat, they hijack a truck that they are hiding in the back because their escape plans have been compromised. And so Soon is being hidden in the back there, but she's only willing to cooperate if they give her immunity. Also, Batwoman beats the crap out of Chase because she's so upset that she dosed Maggie. And then we cut back to Batwoman's story, which is going on now, where she's surrendered to Falchion, and as Falchion's about to take a swinging blow at Batwoman, she nearly jumps out of the way, but still gets clipped, and she's like, "Oh, I thought this new armor was supposed to be impervious. Like, I was shot in it, and I was fine." And she's like, "Ah, but this is a magic sword. Nothing can stop it." And as he is about to wind up again, he's shot in the neck by an arrow, shot by Soon, who is apparently... I want to say they're brother-sister because they're both mentioning a mother, but mother might just be an honorific term. But then, Batwoman's like, I knew you'd show up, and Falchion's all upset. This issue felt like it didn't really do anything. Like, at the beginning of last issue, she was just fighting the hook-handed man. And then at the end of that issue, she was about to fight the Croc and Bloody Mary. And then at the end of this issue, she's just about to fight Falchion. Like, I get that we're telling the story out of order and we are getting a full story's worth over the course of it, but because of the main plot being the thing that I'm relating this all back to, like, I didn't need to know the hook-handed man's backstory after the point where he's already been revealed. Maybe it'll come into play later, but it just feels like they were like, all right, here's this guy's story and this other person's story. You want to have 5 or 6 pages devoted all to, like, Jacob Kane over the course of 6 issues? That's fine, but, like, why does it have to be all 2 weeks ago or whatever? I do feel like all these stories are going to culminate into something, but in the meantime, reading it through, it's just a slog of, like, you have 5 different plots going on. 5 different stories at 5 different points, and all of them are moving at a snail's pace because they're only able to get 2 pages every month. So I'm a little bit upset with that. But in terms of storytelling wise, in terms of like how they handle each individual story, they're all solid. I like each individual one, and it is telling a decently good thing here. But I feel like this is like, there's a cut of the movie Memento that puts all of the pieces in order. I feel like for that movie, it defeats the purpose entirely, but at least it would make it so that I understand what's going on. If they were to do that with this story. If I were to cut up this and put it into sequential order, at least I'd be like, okay, things are happening. but over the course of 3 issues, I feel like nothing has. So, yeah, I don't know. I give it a 6. And honestly, a lot of that comes down to, I'm just not impressed with how much the story is. The art-wise is still fine. It still doesn't quite hold a candle to the layouts that were presented in the first arc, because that was just beautiful the whole way through. This is fine. It still gets creative sometimes, but it's not quite as interesting. So, 6 for this one. I just kind of hope the storytelling style is done after this arc. Green Lantern number 8, written by Geoff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. We left off last issue with Sinestro seemingly about to be converted into an Indigo Tribe member, and Hal being locked in a prison cell, talking to an Indigo Tribe member, Black Hand. So this issue picks up with the Indigo Tribe coming up to Sinestro being like, hey, welcome to your new home. You're among friends. And Sinestro's like, you're not my friends. I have no friends. And then he proceeds to be beaten up by this savage-looking Indigo Tribe member. And so they knock him down and start the cleansing process, which is basically to drain him of all the green energy so they can fill him back up with purple or indigo. And as he does so, he uses his willpower to literally bite through these weird tendril things that are draining him. And when the savage Indigo Tribe member comes back up to beat him again, he pulls out his ring and just blasts him through a wall. And then proceeds to, really get angry. He just, grabs him by the back of the neck, throws him repeatedly into the jail cell doors, and it's like, you dare violate me? I am Sinestro, bitch. Not bitch, but everything else he said. So, he smashes that guy's head open. And then the rest of the Indigo Tribe take him down again because, they need to. Meanwhile, Hal's talking to Black Hand, and he's like, I did some bad things during Blackest Night, so I'm glad that the Indigo Tribe took me in. They healed me. I was very sick. And it turns out that during Brightest Day, he was brought back to life, and everyone thought he was on Earth, but he actually was taken by the Indigo Tribe. And Hal's like, okay, well, that's cool, I guess. You were a little bit crazy. And we see the ability of the Indigo Tribe is that they can channel the different emotions. They can feel those things. So, he shows off that he's able to use the yellow lantern, his fear. He's able to use off the blue lantern, hope. And Hal's like, that's super cool. And, you might actually be able to fix whatever's wrong with Sinestro with that ability, but you're never going to get through to him if you can't use the green light. And Black Hand's like, we can use the green light. And he's like, really? I thought that was the one light you couldn't use. He's like, nah, totally. We can use the green light. And he uses the green light, which then Hal grabs Black Hand by this chain around his neck, holds out his ring to the Black Hand's forehead, which has the Green Lantern symbol on it, and uses it to get a charge for his ring. Pretty smart. So he uses that, he busts out, and he's like, all right, now tell me where Sinestro is, or I'm going to beat the ever-loving crap out of you. But then he uses some Indigo Tribe magic stuff to blast back Hal and starts to get away. And a couple other prisoners who were escaped from the blast start ganging up on Hal, and he has to use his energy to get them away as he sees other Indigo Tribe members approaching to put him back. He's like, all right, screw this, I'm out. The word that the Indigo Tribe keeps using is knock. So as he leaves, he's like, all right, knock this. And he tries to fly out, but he can't fly. Whatever it is, he can't fly. Also, he wasn't able to make a force field earlier to protect himself from the blast. So he's like, all right, what's going on, Ring? And the Ring's like, you're not using real Green Lantern energy. You're using a simulation energy. So it's still there, but it's weak. And he's like, all right, well, what can it do? And it's like, you can make some tiny little constructs. So he makes a little grappling hook to get back over to the wall that he just jumped off of. And then he's like, all right, I need a way to get there quickly. What can you make, Ring? And the Ring makes him a Green Lantern motorcycle that he uses to drive away. And then as he's driving his way through, he's like, oh my god, this place is huge. Ring, how big is this place? And he's like, oh, it's several 100 million square miles. And he's like, cool. Can you show me a map? And there's giant maps for him. So he's like, can you show me where Sinestro is? And he finds Sinestro's location, and he starts driving his way over there. And after a while, he finally passes by this giant statue of Abin Sur, who was the Green Lantern who originally had Hal's ring back in the day. And he's like, whoa, well, hold on, what? Why is Abin Sur part of the Indigo tribe? What's going on here? And as he touches it, he gets these visions of how Abin Sur is their savior and their creator, and something happened that he basically started the Indigo tribe. But as he's like looking at all this stuff, he's blasted by Indigo Light, and we see that Sinestro has been changed into an Indigo tribe member. Yeah, so it's good. It's solid. It's honestly, I liked the whole way through. It seemed interesting enough. It's setting up a good mystery in terms of whatever Abin Sur's connection is. I think if I didn't have a deeper understanding of Green Lantern as a whole, if I came in just with issue 1, I'd be like, what in the hell is an Abin Sur? I also think I'd be a bit more confused on the Indigo tribe than I already am. But they're doing a little bit of a good job of explaining like their abilities and what they did and how they work. So yeah, no, it's solid the whole way through. I'm definitely enjoying the Indigo tribe arc that's going on right now. My only critique, if I can really say one, is that the entire back half of this is the thing of like, oh, how is Hal gonna find Sinestro and where is he going and whatnot, and it just feels like they needed to pad like 4 extra pages. Like it's taken really like there's a part where he says, can you show me a map? And then they take up half a page to show this map, and then they take up half a page to show him stopping his motorcycle to look at the map. And then they take up a quarter page to say, where's Sinestro? Like, it's just really, really padded out. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it does feel like, is there nothing else we could have done in that period of time? But again, tiny critique for an overall great issue. So I'm going to give this an 8. I'm definitely liking it, and it's been solid pretty much since the beginning, barring, I think issue 6 was a little bit low. But that's past, and we can focus on the future. Mr. Terrific number 8, written by Eric Wallace, art by Gianluca Gugliotta, the final issue of the series. Last issue we left off with Donald, one of the board members, becoming some weird cybernetic creep who attacked Alitha, and this issue does a lot. Like, I'm actually impressed with how much Eric Wallace managed to fit into a standard-sized comic issue, but so we open up with Jamal, the replacement that Michael picked after he leaves Holt Industries, trying to make just a single corporate decision on like which project should get the green light. And as he does so, there's some sort of rumbling down beneath, and everyone's like, oh, something must be attacking the building. And it is. It's Donald. He busts in through the building, and he's like, oh, illegal, this should have been mine. And as someone tries to attack him, he's like sending off energy bursts, and then he touches an electrical pad, which just basically just throws off the rest of his skin, and we see that he is a full-on just android now, just like pretty much 100% machine, and he calls himself Digitus, to which Mr. Terrific immediately shows up and starts trying to zap him with like lightning or whatever. And Alitha manages to get away. Everyone flees the tower. Nobody's injured, probably. And then they're like, all right, I gotta learn how to take this guy down because my electricity's doing nothing. And Digitus just starts bragging of like, oh, I have 1 million supercomputers worth in my brain, and they can predict your movements before you even know what you're doing. You can't beat me, haha. And he's also able to control AI, which of course inside of Holt Industries is like nothing but AI the whole way through. So like their security system's firing at him, and Digitus is firing at him, and he's like, all right, I need to figure out something quick. Meanwhile, cut over to Camp Pemberton Marine Base, 88 miles south of LA. They picked up some energy signatures, and a mysterious man is like, sounds like Mr. Terrific to me. Let the Blackhawks deal with this. And it's Commander Lincoln of the Blackhawks, because he is incapable of staying in his own book, and he's really set on capturing Mr. Terrific for some reason. So anyway, a news crew is outside, and they're like, oh, we're going to be making our way in, and we're going to see what's going on. Meanwhile, Digitus turns all of Mr. Terrific's T-spheres against him, so now he's completely defenseless. And he's like, I think I have an idea. And he runs deeper down into the chamber of, like, the central AI hub. And Digitus is like, this is exactly where I wanted to be. Thank you for bringing me down here, Mr. Terrific, who's definitely not Michael Holt. And he hacks his way into the computer, or at least fakes like he's hacking his way into the computer, so that way Digitus commands the AI inside the system to ignore his hacking and then destroy itself, because he apparently is jealous of all of Holt's stuff. But because Holt's AI is an actual sentient being, apparently, it ends up killing Digitus in an act of self-defense. And that's it. That's just how it wraps up, is he just dies. So, yeah. Anyway, they as soon as he crumbles down and he's like, haha, I've defeated him, the ceiling explodes, and then all of a sudden the Blackhawks are in there. And basically, he's just basically saying how, hey, your T-spheres are like crazy technology, and that's what the Blackhawks specialize in. You need to hand them over. And then we get 2 full pages of Mr. Terrific's entire history of him. His wife died, and then his son from an alternate timeline or the future or something says you got to be a hero, so he becomes a hero, and then he's trying to join the Justice League or something, and he's about to come out with a secret identity because he doesn't want to have a secret identity, when he saves the Blackhawks from being attacked by some weird group called the Prodigy. But as soon as they do so, Lincoln immediately is like, hey, all that tech is definitely like property of us now, like by right of the UN or whatever. And Mr. Terrific's like, no, that's not how it's going to work. So ever since then, he's been on their bad side. Meanwhile, as he's trying to figure out like how to deal with them now, because he doesn't want to fight them, but you know, they're not making it easy to back away, the news crew shows up and basically tells him like, Mr. Terrific is a hero, and if you want to take his stuff, you're going to have to do it on live TV. And Lincoln immediately gets a call from higher up who's like, hey, the people in charge saw, and they don't like this, so stand down. And he's like, fine, but we'll meet again, Mr. Terrific. So, yeah, that happens. Then we cut to him finding out that when Donald broke into their system or whatever, there was a second person who broke in. I believe that we saw that happen in issue. It was Karen Starr, and he manages to track it back to her and finds out that it was her the whole time. So he puts on his jacket and goes to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, Alika's walking by and she's like, hey, by the way, I quit. You know, I was always into you and you never really took advantage of that, so here's my parting gift. And she kisses him, and then he's like, why didn't I see that one happening? So then he tracks down Karen's stuff, and apparently she was researching how to open up like an inter-universal wormhole, to which he manages to crack the theory of, and he starts up the thing, and he's like, oh, it feels like my body's being torn apart, but here I go into a brand new adventure. And he's going to a different universe, I guess. Spoiler alert, it's Earth 2. Sorry. That's just one thing I know, is that Earth 2. That's where Karen Starr is from. See the Huntress book, issue 6. It's going Earth 2. So yeah, that's it was a fine book, but it never found its footing. The whole way through, it was just like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if Invisible French Guy? Oh man, wouldn't it be cool if guy named Brainstorm or whatever it was? Like, it never quite got its footing of what it actually wanted to do as a series, like what its mission statement was. And as such, it was just kind of a blur of a bunch of different things that didn't really ever coalesce into anything else. Even the one thing that was staying constant throughout the entirety of the book was the corporate espionage by Donald. And it just amounted to him being a robot that was beaten halfway through the issue. Like, nope, just didn't work. So overall, this issue, I'm going to go ahead and give a 6, and a lot of that comes down to a couple of weird faces. Not a huge fan of some of the art on this, but no, it was just a mediocre book throughout, and I can definitely see why it was one of the early cancellations of the New 52. It's just, it never found what it wanted to be. It was, dare I say, not that terrific. Deathstroke number 8, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Eduardo Pansica. We left off last issue with what could basically be called the end of the arc. It was Deathstroke facing down against his son Grant, and Grant basically having the killing blow on S.H.A.D.E, but refuses to do it and walks off with S.H.A.D.E just bleeding to death. This issue picks up with a then and now story. So then, many, many years ago, it is a dude mugging some guys for his wallet, or for their wallets. He runs back to his car, hops in, and his kid is in there, and he's like, Dad, did you do it? What's going on? And as the dad is driving the getaway car, he crashes into a much nicer looking car, and he sees that it is a mobster, a gangster, something like that, and all the narration basically just saying how S.H.A.D.E is the kid. It's him and his dad. His dad was just like a petty thief who liked to think of himself as some big-time con man, but in reality, he was just nothing. He was absolutely nothing. He was a weak, spineless man. And this mobster that he crashed his car into was apparently someone that he owed money for. So he hands over the wallet he just stole and says, like, there, I swear I'll have the rest of the money next time. And he's like, all right, cool, you got a week. And as soon as he gets back to the car, S.H.A.D.E is like, Dad, are you okay? And S.H.A.D.E's dad just backhands him. And his dad's name is Nathaniel. I don't know if I'll say that, but if I do, Nathaniel. S.H.A.D.E's dad just backhands him. He's just like, I told you to stay in the car, kid. Which S.H.A.D.E doesn't take too well. Cut to now. S.H.A.D.E's in the hospital. He wakes up, and there's a nurse named Hemingway who's taking care of him. And she tells him, hey, you're in Indiana. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Alex pulled you out of that house. And he asks where Grant is and says nowhere. Like, we can't find him. And Hemingway says, well, I was only paid to stick around until you showed up. Like, I'll leave now unless you want me to stay. And he's like, no, you can go. And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to leave you alone again. So see you next time, unless, of course, you don't make it. So then we cut back to then. They're at, like, the Grand Canyon, S.H.A.D.E and his dad. And he's just like, Dad, how does water do all that to rocks? And he's like, well, son, it happens over a very long period of time, but even the toughest things can break after long enough. And he's like, I don't understand what you mean, Dad. And he's like, of course you don't understand what I mean. Meanwhile, the mobster's car comes up, and S.H.A.D.E's like, Dad, it's them. What are we going to do? And he's like, get out of the car, S.H.A.D.E. And he's like, but why would I get out of the car, S.H.A.D.E? And as he gets out of the car, his dad's like, I owe you $10,000, right? And the mobster's like, yep. And then he just pushes S.H.A.D.E over to the mobster. She's like, here, he's yours. We're even. So he just sold his own son. And the mobster's like, all right, pleasure doing business with you. And they drive away. Cut to now. S.H.A.D.E is being approached by someone for a job. It's a really, really small job. A guy named Killswitch. He works with explosives. And S.H.A.D.E's like, all right, I'll do it. And he's like, are you serious? Deathstroke's going to take on such a small job? And he's like, do you want me not to do it? And he's like, no, I just thought you'd want something bigger. He's like, I don't know, feeling generous. So he goes and he finds this Killswitch guy who's just living in like a ratty apartment. And he walks in and starts trying to fight. And Killswitch is just freaking out because Deathstroke's in his apartment. He fires awesome shots, and Deathstroke's like, good, all right, make it an actual fight. And they make their way into the bathroom with Killswitch just screaming the whole time. But he does get his hands on a detonator, and he's like, all right, stay back or I send both of us up. And Deathstroke just pulls up his mask, and he's like, do it. Push the button. Come on. Grow a backbone and do it. And so Deathstroke just walks over slowly and pushes the button himself, and the entire apartment just explodes. And out of the rubble, Deathstroke comes out pretty much unscathed. He sees the burned, charred, destroyed body of Killswitch, and he's like, pathetic. Meanwhile, at that moment, Killswitch's son shows up. He's like, Dad, did you kill my dad? And Deathstroke just tosses him a knife and says, like, hey, when you're older, if you want to come kill me, here you go. And the kid's like, he deserved to die, didn't he? And he's like, yeah, most of them do. Anyway, bye. So then we cut to sometime later. He's talking to Peabody. Peabody's like, oh, okay, so you took another job. I thought you would be out with your injuries. And he's like, I'm never out with my injuries. But apparently he was doing some thinking on how him and Grant are the same, because they basically just keep on wanting to try to one up their fathers. They keep wanting to be better than their fathers. But the difference between Grant and S.H.A.D.E is that Grant could get out, but S.H.A.D.E is doing it because it makes him happy. So he goes, and apparently in Gary, Indiana, his father is still alive, and he goes and visits him on a respirator in his home. And he's like, hey, Dad, I considered quitting my job recently, but then I thought, nah, I'm going to keep doing it just so I can prove how much better I am for you. You sold me for $10,000, and I don't even get out of bed for that anymore. You are absolutely pathetic, and I am always going to be better than you. And he pins up newspapers on the wall opposite of his dad, showing all the things that S.H.A.D.E's done. And he's like, all right, until next time. And his dad just looks pissed, and that's just where it ends. S.H.A.D.E is such an asshole, but it's so much fun. No, honestly, I don't really have much to complain about in this issue. I genuinely enjoyed it the whole way through. I think it was good little, not like over-expositing S.H.A.D.E's past. It's just this tiny little piece of who he is, but it's a very critical piece. It is a very, defining moment of, oh, he was sold by his own father. That tells you a lot about what you need to know. So, no, it was good. It was good throughout. It didn't really forward much of anything. It just feels like a capper on the arc, or just like a little breathing space between arcs. But it was solid the whole way through. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one I'm going to say 8. I'm almost at an 8.5, but that just feels a bit too high for what is essentially just a breather issue in between of arcs. So yeah, 8 for this, and I am definitely looking forward to what insane craziness we can continue on with in future arcs of this book. Grifter number 8, written by Nathan Edmondson, art by Daniel Sempier. We left off last issue with Grifter running into Stormwatch in the Himalayas because the events of the issue before that, but regardless, it doesn't really factor that much into this one. What we did find out, though, was that his brother was alive, and that comes up in this issue. So Grifter and Sophia, the girl that he was with for 2 issues, are flying out of Paris. I don't know how they got to Paris, but as soon as the plane gets up in the air, a dude with dynamite strapped to his chest stands up and says, hey, Cole Cash, this is from the Damonites, beep. And he blows up the whole plane, which crashes down in front of the Eiffel Tower. So Cole is, of course, okay. He makes his way through the wreckage, finds out Sophia's just straight dead, just killed. So, brief but bright light. And then we see that the Damonites have possessed Max's body, his brother's body, and they are using it because they figure, hey, humans care about familial bonds, so he's not going to kill his own brother. And this fight scene and them just saying that over and over and over again goes on for 12 pages, but regardless, they're right for the most part. He's like, I'm not going to kill you, even if you aren't Max on the inside, but I do believe that you're Max on the inside. And then he's like, no, but I'm really not Max on the inside. Also, he has a name, Miev. We met him before. I forget what body he was in, but this Damonite has transferred bodies, so he is a recurring Damonite. So it's just a big action piece, fight scene. A bunch of Damonites are attacking him, including the one inside of Max's body. But he's like, okay, yeah, no, I am genuinely terrified of this. And, I don't want to die. But, I'm running out of options here. So, yeah. And it basically says, how his fear let him rule him and blah, blah, blah. It's just a whole lot of whatever. So then we go to the Eiffel Tower. And Cole steps into the elevator. There's a couple of Damonites chasing after him, but Max is literally climbing up the side of it, trying to get to Cole. And in the end, he's like, all right, here's the thing, Max. I know you're in there. I know that you can hear me. And then the Damonite's like, no, he really isn't. He was killed. So, no, he's not here. And then Grifter's internal monologue is like, crap, he's right. He's not in there anymore. Oh, well. And so he hears the voice of his brother speaking inside his head, the same way he hears like the Damonite voices. And he's like, wait a minute, you're actually there. And so he throws Max into the elevator to get away from the other Damonites. And he holds the gun to the guy's head. They have a little bit of a fight. And he's like, I can still hear you, Max. And as he's like holding the gun to Miev's head, Max speaks out and he's like, hey, stop. Look, here's the deal. Stop trying to save me because it's not going to work. I have to die along with him. There's no way to set me free from get him out of my body or set me free from it. So we both have to die. And he's like, I can't do that, brother. And he's like, tough shit, do it anyway. And so he does. He shoots his own brother and he walks off covered in their Damonite blue blood. And he's like, all right, well, here's the thing. I have nothing left. These Damonites have taken everything from me. But as such, I don't fear death anymore, and I'm going to make them work for it. So he goes on this crazy killing spree. And, yeah, he's sliding down the Eiffel Tower shooting Damonites. And then final page reveal, Seattle, Washington. Savo, another one of the Damonites we encountered before. They hear about Miev dying in the elevator or whatever. And apparently all of this series up till now has been all a plan by Savo because apparently Grifter has the abilities to kill all of the Damonites and defeat the Black Curate, which is what he wants. Like there's some reason this particular Damonite wants all the other Damonites and the Black Curate dead. And he believes Grifter's the one that can do it now that he doesn't fear death anymore. And that's where it ends off. Okay, so in terms of what actually happened this issue, first off, killing Sophia, she was introduced like 3 issues ago. She wasn't in the last issue at all, and then she just dies unceremoniously without a word spoken. It feels like there was like a contract negotiation gone wrong, but she isn't an actress. She's a fictional character who's drawn, so I genuinely don't understand that bit. Regardless, I think that they didn't do a particularly good job of signaling to me earlier on that I actually need to care about the Damonites' names. Because now that Miev came back and Savo is like apparently the mastermind of this whole thing, I feel like, oh, okay, which ones were they? Because I really wasn't paying attention to who was who earlier on. But that's all for prior issue stuff. For this particular issue, it's fine. It just... it felt like 2 issues ago was the end of the arc. Issue 6 was the end of the arc. Then we had a Stormwatch crossover. And then we have this, which is kind of just an in-between ground where it's like, okay, we're just going to... We pretty much are starting at the same place with issue 9 as we would have been at the beginning of issue 7. You don't really have to know anything in between. The only thing that's changed is that he now doesn't fear death, which cool, I guess. Also, he knows about Stormwatch, which he does mention several times throughout of being like, yeah, no, this is a bigger deal than I could have possibly ever imagined. This isn't just some small little, body snatcher thing. No, this is a full-scale galaxy universal thing, and I am way too small of a fish for that. Regardless, fine issue. Nothing blowing me away, but it's just a fine little in-betweener issue. As with most of this book, it's been action for most of it, so I'm not going to hold that against it, but I am going to give this one a 6.5. It doesn't feel right to give it the full 7, with it being just such a little filler thing, but it is a fine issue overall. So I guess we'll check out what's going on in the next trade, because that's the end of trade number 1 for Grifter. Suicide Squad number 8, written by Adam Glass, art by Federico Dellaccio. We left off last issue with Deadshot and the squad trying to get Harley out of the GCPD lockup because she was trying to find the Joker, and then Deadshot ended up shooting her. So, yeah, we pick up right there where Waller's calling in to Deadshot just saying, hey, what's going on in there? Tell me what's up. And he's like, yeah, hey, we need evac. I've got Harley, so... get me an out. And then The rest of this issue is basically just all right, let's just figure out where everybody is, who the squad's going to be, and what all of their, like, mental defects are, and then also this little backdrop, which I'll get to. So we open up with Waller standing over Harley's essentially corpse, because she is on so much life support now, she may as well be dead. Dr. Visyak comes in, who I guess was the scientist who was brainwashed by Basilisk. And she's apparently cured now, and she's like, cool, I need you to get Harley back, so go ahead and do the thing. And they inject her with a green liquid labeled LZRS-017. It's Lazarus goo. Whatever form of that may take, it is Lazarus goo. But they basically inject her with it, and she shoots back to life. And Waller just basically tells her, like, hey, you cost me so many favors and so much, like, money to just be able to keep your little thing under wraps that you are going to be working for me forever. So, yeah, that's a thing. I'm going to skip the B-plot until I get through everyone else. So then we get to El Diablo, who is getting some more prison tattoos put on him, which I'm not entirely... Like, does he need to get re-tattooed every time he uses his powers? Because I thought it was just a thing that automatically happened. But regardless, he's seeing, like, some shadow demons in his cell, and Waller's like, you know, he genuinely believes in, like, God, which makes him dangerous, but he needs to understand that I'm his God now. And then we cut over to King Shark, who is in, I guess, the pool in Belle Reve that they've completely drained out and are just keeping him under heat lamps, because she's trying to dehydrate him so that he forgets that she promised him he'd be out in just like a few more missions. Like, he's trying to keep him loopy. And she's just like, look, whatever I told you, you're a monster and you're going to be stuck in here the whole time. Here's a water bottle, you freak. And then we cut over to Light, the half of the Lime Light, where Lime had her head exploded last issue. Or maybe it was the issue before. And she ain't doing well. She's conjuring up, like, visions of her twin sister with her head missing. So, yeah, Light's not doing so well. Then we get to Black Spider, who, after the events of whatever happened, he's now fully healed and he's ready to go back out on the squad. And Waller's like, you know, you're not, like, a criminal, right? Like, you can leave. And he's like, yeah, no, but I want to stick around. And then we get to Deadshot, who's at a firing range, just taking shots, and he is just missing by a country mile. Like, he is 100% not able to do that. And Waller comes up and just be like, hey, are you good to go? Like, because it seems like you have some major issues going on. And he's like, look, I don't want to be, like, the team leader or anything like that. I hate this. Just let me just sit back and just be whatever sniper you need. And she's like, look, you're leader until I say different. But then it immediately cuts over to Waller talking to Savant, and he's like, hey, Savant, would you like to be team leader? And Savant's like, what about Deadshot? And he's like, Deadshot will listen to you. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not looking to be on Deadshot's bad side. Thanks, but no thanks. And he just is able to leave. Like, I guess he wasn't actually a villain or whatever, but he's just able to leave, and he's like, yeah, no, don't worry, I'm not going to tell anyone Suicide Squad exists. So, B-plot time. There are flashes to someone from their POV who's being held prisoner, and it was from 1 year ago. And it starts off with this bearded man coming in saying, like, hey, brought you some food, maybe eventually we can talk. And he just leaves this food for whoever it is. And then we see them being brought outside, and it seems to be like traditional Japan looking buildings, like pagodas. And he's like, well, what do you think? Like, we're gonna just show you the town or whatever. And the guy is just explaining, like, look, you think I'm part of this crazy ass cult, but I'm not. The world's gone crazy ever since Superman made an appearance. Like, there are all these vigilantes and heroes everywhere. We're just trying to be the good guys, keeping them in line. Will you join our team? And then we see a weird, like, mystic seminar session where they are feeling the spirit of the serpent, aka the basilisk, and we see them basically starting to be brainwashed and convinced that the true enemy, the person that needs to be killed by Basilisk's goals or whatever, is Amanda Waller. And then we see the end goal is that this person is saying, all right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to Metropolis. You're going to commit a high-profile crime, but you're going to allow yourself to be captured. Don't make it look too easy. We're going to pull strings to get you put in a Bell Reeve. You're going to be put onto the Suicide Squad, and you're going to use that to then kill Amanda Waller. And the end reveal is that we don't know who it is. It could be any member of the team that we've seen so far. But as we're setting up that ending, we see that the next mission that the team is going on is they are brought into Metropolis to go find Mitch Shelley, a.k.a. Resurrection Man. And they are going to get in there and get out without anyone seeing because he's just sitting in Metropolis and they need to get in or else they'll, they are all expendable. They can all be killed, blah, blah, blah. Go get Mitch Shelley. So a lot has been set up in just this one issue in terms of we got, it's just the A plot is all just, okay, where is everyone right now? But then the end of the A plot sets it up as, okay, mini crossover with Resurrection Man, which we do pick up on in Resurrection Man number 8 the same week. But then we also have the entire thing of, hey, someone in the squad has been brainwashed and is a member of Basilisk. When's that going to come out? And genuinely, I don't know who it could be. So I'm very interested to see where all of this wraps up. I don't know how long they're going to play the trader thing for because it is beginning of a new trade. So it could be the entire arc's worth. But it is going to be interesting to see who it is because I don't think it's Harley. And I don't think it's Deadshot. But that's really as much as I can narrow it down. So overall, this gets a 7 from me. I'm definitely liking the direction it moves in. I'm hoping, just compared to last arc just felt a little bit all over the place. Like it was just a boom, boom, boom. New thing, new thing, new thing. I hope this slows it down a little bit and allows us to at least enjoy it. So 7 for this. Looking forward to seeing where it goes. Demon Knights number 8, written by Paul Cornell, art by Diogenes Nevis and Bernard Chang. Last issue, the Demon Knights had defeated the Horde, but at what cost? And this issue picks up with them on a cart making their way to Albacerum because the royalty demands their presence. And this issue is just an extended, how in the world did the Jason, Etrigan, and Xanadu thing happen? How did their love triangle form? So we open up with Vandal Savage basically trying to convince everyone, no, I totally was double-crossing them the whole time. I was on your side all along. And nobody's buying it except for Horsewoman, who self-admittedly had a few bonks on the head. So anyway, we have Exoristos basically ask, hey, how did this happen? How did any of this happen? And Jason is asleep inside Xanadu's lap, and then she just recounts the story of back in Camelot, she was training under Merlin, and she was giving Merlin some sass, saying how he didn't. There's a better way to do something, and as soon as she tries to do it, of course it backfires because Merlin's so smart with magic. But he chastises the other students who are laughing at her because, at least she took a risk, at least she was there. And then in runs Jason, who tells Merlin how King Arthur wants him. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll be gone. And by the way, you two, behave. I see the way you're making googly eyes, Jason. And then we have an interjection by Shining Knight, who was basically wait a minute, hold on. I knew Merlin. I was in Camelot. You were most definitely not there. And then Vandal Savage makes the point of, I've been to Camelot a few times, and pretty much every time I've been there, they are always complaining about how Camelot had fallen prior. So maybe there's been several Camelots, and you two just experienced different ones. And Shining Knight kind of complains over the fact of I could have gone home at any time. I was purposely avoiding home because I thought Camelot was gone, but apparently it came back. It sucks. But regardless, the story continues. So Jason and Xanadu are talking, and Jason's like, oh man, I can't understand anything Merlin's talking about. I'm just writing down all the spells. And Xanadu's like, well, yeah, you're just a scribe. And he's like, oh, just a scribe. I thought we had something special. And Xanadu's like, oh no, I totally love you. And he's like, shut up, you don't love me. And then they see what I can only explain is it looks like a UFO attacking Camelot. And then it's the fall of Camelot. It's just the whole thing of, the King Arthur's dead or dying or whatever, and they have to leave. And the women of the lake, I guess, have to take Arthur to Avalon, and Xanadu is one of them, so she has to leave. And she's like, goodbye, Jason. I have to go. And so she makes her own way. But then, as we saw in issue 1, as they tossed his sword or whatever, she dove into the lake and grabbed it, and she's granted immortality or whatever. And at that same point, Jason was bonded with Etrigan. So years passed. She was moving from town to town, and she realized that she was immortal. Occasionally, people were trying to catch her out for being a witch. And at one point, she stayed in the town for too long, and she was being burned at the stake when Jason showed up. And he's like, Xanadu? Hey, how's it going? And he transforms into Etrigan, and Etrigan sets fire to everybody around and then rips her off the stake and saves her. And then once that they had changed places again, she spent the night with Jason. And when she woke up, Etrigan was in his place and was just like, hey, that little snot doesn't deserve any happiness, so I'll murder you if you dare try to make him happy. And she repels him with some magic spells. And apparently she manages to convince him that because she knows magic, she would be a useful ally, and she'll research Merlin's stuff in order to unlock his binding to Jason. So after enough time is spent together, eventually Etrigan is like, hey, we spent enough time and I've grown to like you. I'm going to mate with you. Here is a dead sheep as offering. And Xanadu's like, that's disgusting. I love Jason and I'm never going to mate with you. And he, of course, goes off into tizzy. As she recounts the story to Jason, the next day, he proposes to her. And so they can't stay in the town for too long, so they eventually, save a priest, quote-unquote save, and say, all right, tomorrow we're going to go ahead and we're going to get married via this priest. But then, in the night, Etrigan came out, and despite the fact that neither of them told Etrigan anything, the priest was killed along with everyone else around, and he's like, we can never get married. Oh, I'm so sorry, Xanadu. And she's like, wait, I have an idea. What if I pretend to like the beast, and I'll just tell him that we're cuckolding you, and then when you're here, we'll actually be in love or whatever. And he hates the idea, but they go along with it anyway. And yeah, that's the story of how it happened, quote unquote. Because as soon as they get there, Jason wakes up, and they're just making their way down to a river just for a quick pit stop. And Jason wakes up, and he has to transform into Etrigan as part of their deal. And when he comes out, Exoristos immediately asks Etrigan, hey, how did you and Xanadu become a thing? And Etrigan's basically like, well, here's how it happened. And he just plays off 3 points of the story. The point where she's rescued, the point where he offers the lamb, and the point where the burned down churches, and basically says how she was super impressed that I saved her. She loved my offering of the sheep and totally agreed to mate with me. And when we burned down the thing, it was so that I could save her from a marriage with Jason. And we then got married by a demonic priest instead. It was in the name of Satan. I now pronounce you man and wife. So who's telling the truth? We'll never know. I personally wouldn't trust the demon, but hey, whatever. And then meanwhile, we just get a little epilogue page. In Albacerum, we see that Merlin is actually alive. He is here. He is practicing his magic. And a man comes in with a knife and stabs Merlin through the back, seemingly killing him. And we see tentacles coming out of his mouth, meaning that this is yet another book in the DC lineup that has Daemonites, Daemonites, in Demon Knights. This is going to be so confusing to talk about the Demon Knights being attacked by Daemon Knights. Please bear with me. But regardless, that's where we're going. Pretty much just a filler issue, it feels like. It's just the story of Xanadu and them. I like it. I think it's a solid story, and I do like how just that one page with Etrigan telling his side of the story leaves it up for debate of like, okay, but like, what's actually happening here? My only real critique on it is it just feels a little bit lazy of like, yeah, no, there were multiple Camelots. That's why these two people never met. And it's like, okay, I guess, but it just feels a little bit like maybe you had something else in mind and then something made it not work and you just had to kind of make something up. I don't know. Maybe this was the plan all along and it's going to turn out to be some big thing later on that there are multiple Camelots, but I don't know. It feels a little bit weird right now. But overall, no, I really like this issue. I give it an 8. Mainly because it is just mostly filler. And I'm just, there are like 7 books that involve Daemonites now, and I'm tired of them, man. I didn't need it in Demon Knights, but I guess I should have seen it coming considering Daemonite, it was written on the walls for me. So yeah, 8 for this. I'm looking forward to seeing how this arc continues. Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, number 8, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Alberto Ponticelli. Last issue, they dealt with some monsters that escaped the cell, and they found out that the last monster was actually their son, who I guess was around. And this issue pretty much just deals with that wholesale. Like, it's not leaving it for a whole arc or anything. So we open up on Frankenstein and Lady Frankenstein making their way to some village that's just been destroyed by whatever their son is, and Frankenstein keeps calling it an it, and Lady Frankenstein's like, no, it's a he. It is our son. And Frankenstein apparently, and we see a flashback of this whole thing, but basically, he tried to kill it. And Lady Frankenstein, that's what caused their schism, is that she could not forgive him for that. And, I'll just tell you straight up. So it goes into the flashback. They're standing next to, like, one of the big tubes with the little fetus in it. Father Time has his old body. And they're like, oh, we're so happy that you could make this possible. And Father Time's like, oh, well, with S.H.A.D.E technology, anything's possible. And as they're admiring the little fetus floating in the tube, its eyes open up, and Lady Frankenstein's like, oh, he's looking at me. And Father Time's like, that shouldn't be happening yet. And immediately it bursts out and starts attacking Lady Frankenstein and, like, trying to, like, bite her severely. And without even thinking about it, Frankenstein just shoots him in the head. And Lady Frankenstein, of course, does not take that well. She thinks that he was just scared being born, and that was, something. But either way, they trudge on because they realize where they have to go, because it was made from some level of genetic implants or whatever from the pair of them, so it shares some of their memories. And they make their way to the original Castle Frankenstein, where they were both made. Meanwhile, at S.H.A.D.E.Net, they realize, oh, Father Time, you kept their son alive without their knowledge for all these years. And that was like 1959, I think. So yeah, it's been a while. And Father Time's like, I don't have to explain myself to you. But Ray Palmer gets really pissed off about this, of how he's like just manipulating Frankenstein and Lady Frankenstein and how awful it is. And he's like, you know what? I'm ready to go talk to the UN, and I'm going to recommend that they cut off all funding to S.H.A.D.E. So he storms off, Father Time storms off, and everyone else just keeps watching the screen. We see Frankenstein and Lady Frankenstein go inside of the Frankenstein's lab, and they smell some rotting flesh, and when they look up in the rafters, they see eating a dead body is their son, who doesn't look great. So they try to talk it down, and they're like, hey, all right, we're not going to hurt you. And he just immediately latches onto that word hurt, and then keeps repeating it as he attacks Frankenstein. People watching the screen see this, they're ready to go off to help. But the fight continues on, and Frankenstein, he promised Lady Frankenstein at the beginning of the issue he would not hurt their son. He would do whatever he could to take it in peacefully, and like they can deal with it. But as he keeps on fighting, he's like apologizing for what he did. He didn't want to hurt him, but he needs to stop now. He needs to calm down, and he says, "I don't want to kill you." And then the son of Frankenstein, just not being able to speak very well, just keeps on repeating, like, kill me, over and over. until finally Lady Frankenstein steps in with Frankenstein's sword, stabs him through the neck, and says, "This is the only thing we could have given him as parents. It's the only thing we know." And just walks out sadly. The team is all there, and they're looking at Frankenstein, Lady Frankenstein, like, you guys all right? Is it gone? And they just, yeah, it's gone. And then Lady Frankenstein reaches into the back of her neck and pulls out her S.H.A.D.E net implant and was like, "All right, I quit. I'm done with all this. Like, I'm going my own way. How dare you do this?" And Father Time's like, "You can't just leave. Like, you belong to S.H.A.D E, whatever." She gives Frankenstein a kiss as she leaves, and then walks over to Father Time and just starts strangling him, and just like, "You have been lying to us for decades. You knew that was there the whole time, and you treat like, I'm never going to forgive you for this." So she walks off into the like mountainous tundra, and Frankenstein's just like, "Well, I officially have nothing else in my life except for S.H.A.D E, so let's go home." And that's where it wraps up. They did a lot in just one issue. Like, hot damn, they not only set up, gave the backstory to, finished the whole Son of Frankenstein thing, but then also gave totally legitimate reason as to why not only Ray Palmer, but also Lady Frankenstein were leaving the book. And it was great. It was fantastic the whole way through. Honestly, my only critique I would have liked to see a bit more of, like, Son of Frankenstein, but if there's no problem with it being just this real quick thing. I think it may have come a little bit too easy that Lady Frankenstein decided to kill him again, especially considering the entire first half of the book is "how dare you," but considering that Son of Frankenstein was literally asking for it, I'm more agreeable to it. So overall, I give this issue, honestly, like a 8 feels right. I'm close to 8.5, but 8 feels right. I don't know. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what's missing for those extra 2 points, but an 8 just feels right to me. So I have no clue where we're going to go from here. Maybe S.H.A.D.E's going to lose its funding because of Ray Palmer. Maybe we're going to go on a finding Lady Frankenstein thing, convince her to come back. Maybe she's out of the book for good. I don't know, but it's got me. It's hooked me, and I'm very, very interested. Resurrection Man number 8, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, art by Fernando Dagnino. We left off last issue with Mitch deciding he's going to go learn about himself at the library because, hey, why not? This issue picks up with a completely different set of characters. We are introduced to Kim Rebecki, who is a detective who uses her psychometry in order to track down people, which is basically you touch someone, you get a magic vision of, like, them, or you touch something that belonged to them and you see how they, like, interacted with it, and then she uses that to detective. And she's been hired to find Mitch Shelley by some mysterious benefactor, is her exact words, and she's not having a lot of luck, but she's tracking down some leads. Meanwhile, we're also introduced to the Butcher, who is a serial killer who uses necromancy in order to get his answers. And he also wants to find Mitch Shelley, but seemingly in the name of Satan, because I guess his soul is overdue. And he kidnaps a homeless guy and says, "Well, you're homeless, and he's homeless, so that's pretty much all the link I need for my magic." And he slices the guy open, and it causes a huge, like, explosion thing. And they both manage to track down exactly where Mitch is, because why not? And so then we cut over to Mitch. He's at the library. He's looking stuff up online. He goes through everything he knows about himself, how, like, he was a defense contractor. He was definitely a dick. He knew his name, his dad's name. He knew a couple of his friends' names. If that whole hallucination that he had while in, I think, Arkham was to be believed, which he does. And then he's like, all right, internet's got nothing for me. Like, either I never existed or I was scrubbed off the internet. So maybe some print records will have it. So he starts heading down to print archives. And who does he run into but... was it Kim? I've already forgotten her name. The psychometry detective. Kim Rebecki. Already bumps into her. And as soon as he goes to help her up, she touches his hand and then gets these crazy visions and blacks out from how big they were. And when she comes to, Mitch is like, hey, Kim, I went through your stuff. You're a detective, and you've got a picture of me and a gun. So what's going on here? And she explains the situation like, oh, I was a detective, but like, I thought, based off of my research, that you were a bad dude, but I see that's not the case. But before they really even manage to get into it that much, the butcher just crashes in through the roof and says, like, Mitch, you will come with me. I will use my magic. And Mitch is still running off the fire ability that he had last issue. So he tries to make a shield, but it is literally of no use against necromancy magic. Kim tries to, like, do whatever she can, but is nothing against the butcher. And as they both start running away from him, he kills an innocent civilian standing by in order to fuel his magic. And straight up, the butcher just, stabs Mitch. He just straight through the heart, kills him. And because of how powerful his life essence, I guess, is, he's like, oh, I'm so strong, I can do anything. And he starts casting some big necromancy spells. And then Mitch's ability kicks in, and he comes back to life, which causes the butcher's spells to start draining off of his own life force instead of Mitch's. Therefore, he just dissolves. He's just gone. He used up his own life force for his own spells. So, yeah, that was literally a problem just solved itself. So Mitch is then talking to Kim, and she explains the situation like, look, I did my research. You were a bad dude. But when I touched you and I saw all this stuff about you, I realized that's not you anymore. You're a good guy. And I would never have investigated you if I knew you were a good guy. And Mitch is like, wait a minute, hold on, back up. You said you knew about me? And she's like, yeah, but like, you're not that guy anymore. And he's like, I don't care. Tell me everything you know. But before they can even begin to talk, Mitch is shot in the head from above, and down from the ceiling descends the Suicide Squad. If you read Suicide Squad issue number 8, which came out this same week, that's how that issue ends as well. So it all ties together. And this trade actually includes Suicide Squad number 9, so I guess that's necessary reading before we continue on. That being said, I like this issue. I think it did, because the whole thing, it doesn't really focus on Mitch as much as it really focuses on the other two, like the two detectives who are tracking him down. And I just like the weird little, I wouldn't even say quirks, but just the weird things that they are using, where there are supernatural entities, of course there are, in this world, and some of them are just using them as just their job. Like, it's not a thing of them saving the world or anything like that. It's literally just I can touch people and find out where they are, and therefore I'm going to be a detective. I like that. I think it's a neat little touch. Suicide Squad at the end, whatever. Like, it's just another crossover because why not? I'm not sure. It seems like they're going to try to make Kim stick around for a little bit just because they're kind of building up a rapport back and forth. But I feel like we've had like 4 sidekicks for Mitch already, and all of them just were like thrown away as soon as we started issue, 5, 6? It's just weird to me how many he's gone through with people where it's like, oh, I guess I can help you, and then whoosh to the wind. But no, it's a solid book. I do like it overall, as much as I'm nitpicking about it. It's consistently surprised me with how good it is, and I think I say that pretty much every week. I never considered Resurrection Man to be something that actually had something to it. It always just seemed like a weird D-list hero that they just used to fill out the ranks. But there is an actual story being told here, and I very much like it. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 7.5. Don't ask me why it's not higher, because it's just what feels right. It's just a gut feeling. And I guess tune in next time to Suicide Squad issue 9 to see how that all wraps up. The S.H.A.D.E, issue number 7, written by James Robinson, art by Javier Pulido. We left off last issue with S.H.A.D.E coming in to help out Sangra in her final battle against the Inquisitor. And yeah, it's an elaboration, but he steps in and he says, isn't it weird how these fight scenes, like, they only last a couple seconds, yet they seem to drag on forever. And he just is thinking about all the stuff that's been going on, and how, like, all the hostages over to the side, and Sangra's doing her thing, and how How she's fighting for her city and her people and whatnot. But apparently, he recounts a conversation that he wasn't present for. He actually says how he was told this later. And it's basically the Inquisitor's backstory of like why he's doing this. And it boils down to he actually did die back in 44 by dropping into that molten magma pit or whatever. And when he died, he went to hell. So eventually he made an actual deal with the devil to come up here and send sinners down to Satan in return for being able to, come back up here. So not only was he working for Satan, he was also feeling like he was also doing the Lord's work because he was like sending sinners to hell. So it's the best of both worlds here. And Lysandra's hearing all that and she's like, dude, you're making an actual deal with the devil and you're telling, are you kidding me? You're straight evil, man. You have no room to talk about sin or anything like that. You are genuinely the worst. And he's like, but like, whatever. Yeah, Barcelona's going to die. So then he reveals that his whole thing that he built is a soul bomb. And the way it functions is because they, like, where everything was mapped out in terms of the people committing suicide and where their previous battles were, it made it so it's been a pentagram all around the city of Barcelona. And this place that they're in will create like the final point of it and therefore send all these souls in Barcelona to hell. That's the gist of it. Then S.H.A.D.E comes in, doing the fight scene and all that. And as he's holding off some of like the grunts, a giant devil demon walks in and he's like, remember me, S.H.A.D.E? And S.H.A.D.E.'s like, nope, genuinely don't. And he's like, oh, we fought in Paris at 1901. I now have the power of hell behind me. You'll never defeat me. And he's like, still don't remember you, but okay, whatever. So then Montpellier, the snake detective guy, comes in and he's like, hey, don't worry about it. They're not as strong as they think because, as it turns out, she fought the Inquisitor in this place back in 1926. And so S.H.A.D.E.'s like, okay, does that matter? And he's like, that makes all the difference. Go for it. And he's like, all right, cool, whatever. And so he uses his shadow power against the demon, and it just tears him apart. He is literally just being held up by it. And S.H.A.D.E. has a moment of introspection where he thinks of his wife and he thinks of the rest of his family and basically how he's always done wrong by everyone in his family. He's never particularly cared about them in the way that he knows he should have and how he's always let them down. And as he's thinking about this, the S.H.A.D.E. is just coming out of him in droves. And he's just absent-mindedly doing this as he gets more and more like deep in his sad thoughts until finally the entire city of Barcelona is temporarily just in darkness. Just 100% no light, absolute darkness. Later on, we meet back up with them. Apparently, during the Shadow thing, either S.H.A.D.E. sent the Inquisitor to like the Shadow Realm or he got away. It's a little unclear, so that way Sandra has continuing adventures, I guess. And S.H.A.D.E. asked Montpellier, like, what did 1926 mean? And as it turns out, because of some riots that happened in, like, the 40s, when they rebuilt that building after it was torn down, they actually built it several hundred yards away from where it originally was. So the building wasn't actually in the same place where they fought. Therefore, it didn't complete the pentagram. So they didn't have the power. So yeah, super smart or whatever. But S.H.A.D.E.'s like, all right, look. Well, I guess before that, Sandra comes up and is like, hey, by the way, you asked about your blood way back in the beginning issue. Turns out it went bad. I don't have your blood anymore. But then he comes out and he's like, look, I just got a call. Like, my grandson died anyway while I was away. He was the whole reason I was getting the blood. But I came to some realizations that I've been a bad family member, and so I need to go take care of the issues that he was looking into, aka I gotta find the bad apple on my family tree. So I'm gonna go do that. But hey, you are my daughter. I am your father. And I will be back very soon. I'm not just gonna disappear for centuries again. I'm going to keep this going. And so he fades away as Sangra literally cries over seeing him. And then we cut to London, where a white-haired man opens up a big door and walks in and says, the S.H.A.D.E is on his way, my lord. And then we see a crazy-ass Egyptian god-looking dude who's, I guess, excited about that. And, okay, whatever. Barring that last page, that definitely didn't feel like it stuck with anything, I think this was a pretty good wrap-up to this 3-issue arc. It was a good thing of, okay, we built up the Inquisitor, Lysandra, we built up how Montpellier is a good detective and whatnot. Honestly, this arc felt less about S.H.A.D.E than it did Lysandra. Like, he was there, and the last issue, I guess, ostensibly mostly focused on him, but it was completely just like, it wasn't set up, is the best way I can say it. Like, he feels sad that he wasn't there for his family, but it didn't feel like that really came from anywhere. Don't get me wrong, they, like, justify it in the book, but if you look at it over the terms of the arc, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. So, it was fine. It was a good thing. Javier Pulido's art, it fits this arc, and I've come to associate that. Like, I couldn't even imagine Lysandra looking like anything but the way he draws it, but I am glad that it's not the way that the entire book looks, because it does have a very distinct and very polarizing look to it. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing what other artists we get on this. But yeah, no, solid arc all around. As for the issue individually, 6.5. And that sounds pretty harsh, but it just comes down to, I've seen 2 or 3 times in this book already where S.H.A.D.E has had like a really powerful emotional moment of like him coming to terms with something. The Swan thing comes, for instance. This one tried to play that same beat, but I really just didn't feel it. It didn't feel as impactful to me. So, yeah, that's S.H.A.D.E number 7, and we are now officially more than halfway done this book, so can't wait to see how we start winding up to the final plot of who is the bad apple on S.H.A.D.'s family tree. And that's it. That's all the books that came out April 11th, 2012. And before I forget, yet again, there is a new event starting next week. Has nothing to do with the culling. It is Night of the Owls, a Batman-centered book. It will stretch over 2 of the issues we're talking about next week, and also like the last page of every other Bat book. So do those count as part of the event? The internet says no. I say no. Therefore, no. But let me tell you all the books that are coming out next week anyway. We have the number 8 issues of Batman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern Corps, Captain Atom, DC Universe Presents, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, and Legion of Superheroes. So, yeah, it's Batman and Nightwing. Those are the ones that are part of the event. All the other Bat books are just there. They'll be there next issue. Those are all tie-ins, but Batman is the core, Nightwing is a tie-in, and everything else is unrelated until the last page. So, enough of wasting your time. Let's wrap this up. Hey, there's a Twitter, DC Comics Podcast, Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV. Everything else, there's MasterCard. And with that, I'm done. I'm going to go do things because I'm filming this just before my weekend, and I like to pretend that I have plans. So, as always, thank you for listening, and try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.